Please read the disclaimer before the story begins. I moved into a new apartment and I think my neighbor is a serial killer. I finally put down my last box into the apartment after moving. Since I threw out most of my things before moving, I didn't really have many things. After all, I didn't want anything that was associated with Blaine to be in my new apartment. Well, don't get into another toxic relationship. You cannot afford moving to a new place again. I said to myself as I looked at my new apartment with all my boxes on the floor. I couldn't help smiling. Even after I broke up with Blaine and kicked him out, I still couldn't sleep knowing that this douchebag slept on the same mattress I was sleeping on, showered in the same bathroom I showered in, sat on the same couch I sat on. Everything smelled like him. Him and his stupid cologne. He was so toxic. He would leave the house at 10 a.m. and come back at 2 a.m. smelling like alcohol and cigarettes. The only things I provided for him were clothes and shelter and money. I knew that if I wanted to start living normally again, I would have to move out of the house and move somewhere else. I threw out most of the things I owned because most of them reminded me of him. I started setting up everything and things were going quite smoothly. I was done setting up my things at around 9 p.m. For the first time in 3 years, I felt free. I was exhausted. But I still had work the next day, so I decided to call it a night and go to bed. I slept really well and woke up the next day feeling quite happy actually. I work at a local coffee shop and had to be there at 6 a.m. I got out of my apartment at around 5:40 a.m., where I'm used to the streets being a little bit deserted if I do say so myself, only to find the neighbor also going out of his apartment with a big black trash bag. I was a bit taken aback but decided that maybe he too had work and was taking out the trash while he was at it. "Good morning," I say, smiling. After all, a good first impression is important. "I'm Macy. I just moved in yesterday actually." "Good morning. I'm Brandon. Sue, what wakes you up so early in the morning?" he says smiling back. I thought it was obvious because I was wearing my uniform but decided to tell him anyways. "Oh, I work at a coffee shop and we have to be there quite early," I say. We have some small talk which takes about 5 minutes. Then I go to my car and start driving to work. I come back at 7 p.m. feeling quite exhausted but still happy. Nothing could have ruined this day for it was the first day here. I decided to watch some TV. As I was watching, I hear this blood-curdling scream of a woman from outside. I lower the sound of the TV and try to hear better. "No, stop. Please. I beg you." And then more shouting from a man. Now the first thing I thought this was that the neighbor had a movie going on full volume. I decide to give him a call. We exchanged numbers during the small talk in case I needed anything. Hello? Brandon? I think you might have your TV a bit too loud, do you mind lowering it a bit?" "Sure. Need anything else?" "No. Thank you." After the call, he did lower his TV and I couldn't hear the screaming anymore. The next day, I decided to get out by 5:20 a.m. to avoid small talk because I was late for work the day before. I get out, and there he is. Again. At 5:20 a.m., it looked like he too wanted to avoid small talk. He again had a really big black trash bag. That should have been a red flag. No one can make that much trash in a day. I still decided to ignore that for the sake of not being judgy. We go down the lift together and when we go down, he goes to his car and I go to mine. He then takes the route to the woods. This should have been my second red flag. Who goes to the woods at 5:20 in the morning with huge black trash bag? I go to my work and come back at 7 p.m. again. There's more screaming from a woman when I come back. I was just about to get in my apartment but decided to hear a little bit of whatever it is he's watching. "No please. I'll do anything. But please stop." And then I hear the male voice. His voice. Screaming at her. I stand there. Frozen. This man could not be watching a movie right now. Which could only mean something else. He knows where I work. He lives next door. I'm currently inside my apartment. I want to call 911 but I have a nasty feeling he could get away with this kind of shit. After all, I don't think this is his first time doing this. If he gets away, he'll know it was me who called. Help. I started pacing back and forth in my kitchen. I could still hear the screaming. After about 5 minutes, the screaming stopped suddenly. Oh God. I should have called the police. I should have. Oh my God. Oh my God. I whisper to myself as tears start pouring down my face. Now it's my fault someone got murdered. Oh my God. Oh my God. I felt very lightheaded. Like I was in a dream. Like all of this was one big blur. I sat on the couch as I felt that my legs might give up on holding my weight any longer. I didn't know whether to call the police or not. It was too late. The woman got murdered already. I decided to drink a little bit of water and go talk to anyone else in the building. Maybe if we both contact the police, he'll finally get caught. I go out of my apartment and take the lift to the 3rd floor. I live on the 2nd floor. I press my ears to a few apartment doors, desperate to hear any sign that someone was home. I finally get to an apartment where the sound of the TV was clearly audible. I ring the doorbell and the door opens. "Hello?" says the voice of a girl who looks between ages 25 and 28, as she opens the door. "Hi. I'm Macy. I'm sort of new here and there's one thing I'd really like to clear up with you," I say. After all, getting to the point faster means more lives could get spared. Her face gets a bit lighter and her voice becomes a bit rasp. "It's the screaming, isn't it?" she says, looking at the floor. "Come in." I get in and she gestures me to sit on the couch. She turns off the TV and looks me dead serious in the eyes. "Never bring that subject up again. Do you hear me?" she says, seriously. But someone's getting murdered every day," I manage to mutter out. She looks behind her and then looks at me again. "Look. If you want to live and see daylight again tomorrow, never ever bring that up. Everyone who brought it up, even to the police, were dead the next day. Just don't talk about it, okay?" She takes a deep breath, sighs, and continues. "Look. I know this may seem difficult for you, but you have to ignore it. The screaming, I mean. If you don't bring it up, you'll live and you'll be fine. If you do, however, that is going to be a problem," she says. When I was just getting up to leave, I remembered that she never gave me her name. Also, what's your name again?" I say. "Sarah," she says and smiles. I leave and get back to my apartment feeling a little bit relieved, but the knot in my chest was still quite tight. I get into my apartment and immediately break down. What the hell was going on? Why were people here not reporting this? I went back into my kitchen and started pacing back and forth again. If I continue living here, I will have to live in constant fear. Just listening to people getting murdered was plain torture in itself. After about 5 minutes of crying silently and pacing, I hear a knock on the door. I wipe my eyes quick and open the door. And there he is. Brandon. Standing there like the idiot he is. "Oh, hello Macy. I just wanted to ask if my TV sounds were bothering you. I am a sucker for horror movies after all," he says, smiling innocently at me. I could not believe it. This man, who had been murdering a woman, not even an hour ago, was able to smile. My blood was boiling and I had this sudden urge to slap him on his face. But obviously I couldn't. Not with this man who's a serial killer. "Oh no. It's okay. I had a horrible headache yesterday," I say, managing a smile which I was not very sure I could manage. "Wait, have you been crying?" he says. Shit. I couldn't tell him why I was crying obviously. I decided to tell him some dumb reason and cry some more. "It's just my cat died and I never got to say goodbye," I said, tears rolling down my face. It wasn't that hard to fake cry realistically, especially when I already felt like crying. He was at my parents' house. He was going to come here just after a week, you know, after I settle in and all. I say and give a very realistic sniff. I could not believe I was actually doing this. I don't even have a cat. In fact, I'm allergic to them. He gives me a sympathetic look. The stupid dumbass. He just murdered a woman and he pretends he cares about a cat dying. "It's alright Macy. You take your time to settle and adjust to the loss," he says. "I just thought I'd come and check up on you. You know, make sure you're okay. Hey, don't you think you should take the day off? You know, to grieve the loss of your cat peacefully?" "Yeah. Maybe I'll do that. But I don't think my boss will allow me to take the day off. I'll call him," I say. We say goodbye and he goes back to his apartment. I still couldn't stop thinking. He didn't want me to go to work the next day. I know he goes to the woods. So, what if he's going to do something exceptionally bad? Then he needs to make sure I didn't go to work tomorrow, cause that would mean I would see him taking the route to the woods. Maybe he thinks the police will find out about whatever crime he wants to do and he needs to make sure I don't see him going to the woods in case the police question me. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait until I hear him get out of his apartment and wait about 15 minutes and drive to the woods myself. to see what the hell was going on. I'm going to record all of it. His crime and all. And I will report it. I know I should be listening to Sarah, but I'm not about to make someone just worthlessly get killed. Not on my watch, I won't. I'll give an update soon. It was around 4:20 a.m. I tried to sleep past that time, but I just couldn't. I decided that maybe that was a good thing, as Brandon might decide to get an early start. I started packing stuff into a backpack. Not much, but things that will keep me alive for a day or two, like food and water, in case I can't go back. I was going to close my backpack when I felt that maybe I should take a weapon with me. I started debating in my head whether it would be necessary or not. You really want to go to the woods without taking a weapon? I say to myself, as I put in a knife. My voice was raspy from all the crying the night before. I don't own a gun or anything that would really protect me, but then again, a knife might just come in handy. I lastly put in my phone. I take a deep sigh and stand by the door, my ears pressed hardly, listening for any sign of Brandon getting out of his apartment. After about 5 minutes, I hear an apartment door quietly closing. He was getting out of his apartment. I then hear quiet footsteps, and the footsteps get a bit louder. He was walking towards my apartment. I take a deep breath in. He was pressing his ears to my apartment door, trying to hear whether I was awake or not. After he decided that I was asleep, he starts walking to the lift. I heard the lift door open and footsteps getting in the lift. Then the lift's door closed. It felt like my heart was in my stomach and I had this terrible urge to vomit all over the floor. I waited for 10 minutes and then got out myself. I took the lift and started thinking, is this all worth it? Am I going to make it out alive? I start feeling the knot in my chest tighten just thinking that I might not be able to make it out alive. But I was determined. If I was gonna get murdered in this, at least I wouldn't have to live with the guilt that 2 women got murdered on my watch. The lift door opens and I go to my car. His car wasn't parked, obviously. 2 other cars weren't parked either. That should have been a red flag, but I ignored it. I go to my car, get in and start the car. After about 3 minutes, I start driving to the woods. I stop at the woods and 3 cars are there, parked in front of the woods. I start having a really bad panic attack. I feel like I can't breathe. I close my eyes for 2 seconds and get out of my car, wearing my backpack. I had my knife in my hand and started walking. Now these woods are particularly dense. They have a lot of trees. Like, a lot. There were some rumors that these woods were haunted, which kept the people away. Which, now that I think of it, was clever to pick as a place for disposing bodies. I walk and walk until I hear some faint noises. I take out my phone and press record. That was the whole point of this, why I came. I had to have evidence. I walk some more, the knot in my chest getting tighter by the second. I hide as much as possible behind the trees. I was scared. Like, really scared. I tried to keep my breathing as low as possible. I could finally hear what he was saying. Then, things started to go downhill. He wasn't the only person speaking. There were other voices. Shut up, Brandon. You really think burning them in the woods is a good idea? The last thing we want to do is start a fire. Talk about drawing attention. Said a voice. I recognized the voice. It was Sarah. I couldn't believe it. Sarah was in this. Well, what do you suggest we do then? Throw them in a river? Said the voice of another man. I looked a little bit and realized something at that moment that would have stopped me right then and there from doing this whole shit. Everyone in this building was standing there. Everyone. Now, this building isn't exactly an old one, so not many people live in it. I'd say about 11 to 12 people maximum live in the building. Throwing them in the river is actually more reasonable than burning them in the woods, said Sarah. Yeah, right. Only they'll float right on the top, but that doesn't seem to be a really big problem to you. Snapped Brandon back. Suddenly an arrow flies right onto where my head was peeking a second ago. Intruder! Screamed a man's voice. I couldn't believe it. I was almost killed by someone who was supposedly my neighbor and who also happens to be armed with a crossbow. All I needed. I freeze. I couldn't possibly move. I know it sounds stupid, but I was practically paralyzed. I managed to walk out from behind the tree and Brandon smiles. Not the friendly innocent smile he always managed even after murder, but an insane, twisted smile. What a pleasant surprise to see you, Macy. He says. Would you care to explain yourself? The man with the crossbow lifts it up. Now, Joshua, not just yet. We were planning on telling her anyways. He says, his twisted insane smile growing wider. So, Macy, would you like to join us? It isn't half as bad as it seems, really. Sarah looks at me, her eyes burning with hatred. I told you to keep your nose out of it, bitch. After all you've seen, you're not going back there alive. Not unless you join us, of course, she says. Now, the last thing I would ever do, was join a couple of mad idiots, in a big cult who murder people every other day. Never. I start running. The video was still going. They start running behind me. Now telling you how horrifying this was isn't going to do half justice to how horrifying it felt. It was crazy. They were fast. But I was a really good runner in high school. Now, I'm obviously not as good as I used to be in high school, since I only run during the weekend, but hey, it did help me. I was running. About 3 arrows whizzed past me, barely even missing me. I still have no idea how in the world I made it out alive. But I did. I immediately start the car and start going full speed. Now, I want to say this though, imagine 11 people trying to get into 3 cars. It wasn't exactly fast. Not as fast as it took me to drive away in my car. I drive to the nearest police station and show them the video. The 11 people are all arrested and I am currently living with my parents. I don't think I want to live alone anymore.